So today, I think I'm going to start this one just by happiness. A person can't become happy unless you've never stopped yourself from ever doing the things that made you happy or thinking in ways that make you happy. If you're happy, then it's because you're making yourself happy. Largely because of how you look at things. And making a habit every day of creating the things that make you happy, doing the things, being in a certain state of mind, and saying it's okay for it not to go the way that I want to. I found ultimately it comes down to the permission. If you can give yourself permission. But when you do, and you develop the habits that it takes, like I made a video maybe a month ago now, on the importance of meditating every morning. Doing some sort of morning routine, a nightly routine, but more a morning routine I talked about in that video, that is conducive to making you feel good. And it can take a lifetime to find what it is. And it took me a long time to figure out that when you put all your eggs in one basket, even though the saying is true, most of the time we don't follow that. We tend to go in a full tilt in whatever it is that we're doing. Not very many of us have a backup plan. And when you put all your focus in one spot, you can be torn down pretty good. So when it comes to being happy, part of that is recognizing how everything can eventually change, and that when you go through the experience of losing something that you identified with so much, when you're not ready for that, it becomes one of the most painful things you can experience. For me, it was a loss of identity. And this ties in perfectly to being happy, because it took me 6 years of depression after that, because I couldn't, and I still can't, exercise the way I used to, the way I enjoy. And although mentally I'm over the pain of it, physically I'm reminded every day, right? So I had to learn. I went on this whole, what is this then? Wow, if this can turn just like that, like what is the experience of life? Is there something else? There has to be something. I only fell onto, or I should say, when it came to looking how to be happy, it only happened to me suddenly after. It was the strangest thing, because it just happened suddenly out of nowhere. It didn't even expect it. Poof, I was a different person. I'll never forget the date, 2016, August, or September the 16th, 2016. September the 18th. September the 18th, 2016. Maybe I will forget the date at that rate. How that came out. To experience how good feels, you know that there's a certain value to doing it. See, for me, exercise brought me a certain type of ego fulfillment, which back then I thought was a good thing. And to some degree, it is a good thing as well to explore it. But I was doing it in a way that I was attached to it, so if I lost it, it would hurt really bad. And because I had propped so much of myself up on it, by it, and lifted me up, and it made me feel good, it made me feel powerful, I guess. It made me feel accepted, loved. And then all of that, those things that come from that attachment, when they're pulled out from under you, leave huge emotional scars. So that's the reason I talk about a lot of these things. Because it hurts to go through something like that. And I know a lot of people are going through their own version of that right now. So developing habits. Because things slip away from me now, and in comparison, I'm a completely different person. Although I still have the same blueprint, if you will, of the other Danny, a lot of it fell off, broke off, shards of it just became aware that, and through reading a lot of books on spirituality and just, videos and stuff like that, and talking to everybody around me about it, anyone that was willing to engage, and you get a feel for it. And then you see there's a few recurring themes. This is really important, right, when it comes to being happy. And one of the recurring themes that you hear in all pretty much all of them is to I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, develop positive habits. Develop habits that you do every single day, especially in the morning, that are dedicated to you, looking at things the right way. You train your brain because there's two ways you could make your mood two ways if you're thinking about, what to do with your mind. And if you just let it be, a lot of times it goes into its own pattern, and some people they don't like their mind's pattern. So it becomes difficult. So what I'm saying there's a way to make it work, because a lot of it is basically auto function. If you just watch it, it just kind of loops a lot of it. Every time you're faced with the same situation around the same time of the day, the same loop types of thoughts start to go in. If you really watch it and you don't try to do anything, and you're just going to see, what does it really do? If I just don't do anything, you'll notice the mind it keeps going. And a lot of us, it makes us mad. We lose ourselves in and I at some point kind of almost did, I was very mad at it. And enough that I needed to change it. I just couldn't take it anymore. So I learned as well, little habits in the morning, looking at the world positively. All these things help. It's because you have a choice. You can let it be and let it talk you into however you don't like. You can drop that whole thing. But if you're not ready to drop that whole thing, you want to train the brain, because no matter what, even if you drop it, would you rather listen to negative talk all the time, or would you rather listen to positive talk, or like a neutral? You try to bring it to a neutral where you're not picking sides. You try to look through the whole situation, but sometimes you have to look at it positive. You have a choice, right? So if you know you have choice, you have a certain amount of power you can assert in a situation, and everyone's looking to be happy. So generally speaking, if you're just thinking about the way you feel in your body, if you feel anxious, then a way to get rid of that anxiety energy is to simply just accept, to just talk your mind into the positive outlook of it. And then as it's coming out, you allow yourself to feel the truth that that is also possible for you too. It's part of accepting it. So you learn to develop these types of habits wherever for you, however it works. You try to flip the script in the where you notice there's a certain, feeling of disagreeing, and you don't challenge everything. You don't try to take on your whole, but you just try. You think of it as a warm hug. Come into the approach with a warm hug. When you have the right type of feeling to go along, some sincerity, because you want to heal, and when you go in with that approach, you start to heal. You start to really heal, and you learn it's not about fixing everything. Eventually, you see that the mind is just repeating patterns a lot, so you don't have to go on a mad search trying to solve all of what you think is your problems, which are simply repetitive thoughts about the past or the future, and sometimes about what's going on. Your brain basically interprets whatever it is that your body sees. So information comes in, and then it's interpreted, after a delay in time, and then in there, whatever words and communication structure you have, however you talk to yourself, it's going to whoop. You have your own self-talk version of your brain. Your ego kind of running the ship. But when you realize that function part of your brain, you can actually train the words that it says. And if you notice, if you notice that when you, I was going to try to change the conversation. If you notice when you watch the way you feel, and just touch the mic. A lot of how you feel is also related to what your brain is saying, and how much of what it is saying, how much of your brain is saying that you take personally, whatever hurts you or makes you happy. So largely part of how you feel, what is one way, an aspect of experiencing Earth as a human, is to experience it through what your mind says about it, and then your body's reaction to it. It's a very roller coaster way of living. That's how my brain was at that point. And for some reason, before that, I could see it, and I didn't like it. And then after that moment, September the 18th, I was so happy. It was incredible. And you realize in those moments like that it's valuable, because in the end, if you had a choice and you were to say, would you rather feel miserable or happy? Well, it's obvious, right? So if you notice you can do it inside yourself, that's less in a way that's dependent on the outside world, but not in a way that you don't care about anything, which is a struggle that I'm currently kind of coming out of, learning to, because that's something that I had to learn that way as well, I guess. I usually have to learn things the hard way. For some reason, I like learning it that way, organic. You can talk about it, maybe not as intellectual as others, but you're speaking from experience. And that's where I try to get all of what I'm saying in these videos. Because I can't say for sure if what I've read is true or not. So I do my best not to reference anything as much as from what worked for me. And that's all I can say, is that there are things that for me worked, certain ways. And I found that if you're open-minded and you look at your brain as a computer and you're just programming its code, as long as you simplify it somehow, there's always a way to flip the script in your mind that you can give yourself permission to explore a new way of doing something inside you, with your conscious chatter, your self-conscious chatter. I mean, not self-conscious, your unconscious chatter. A lot of it is. So when it comes to being happy, I found that has helped me quite tremendously, because you see things less personally when they happen. You see things almost in a way that you expect the worst, but hope for the best, and you kind of not really, you know that it could go either way, and you're not dependent on the siding. Instead, you have worked, or I have for quite some time, well, 4 years, not that long, worked on remaining in the center, retraining my brain so that when it goes to the negative, that it doesn't allow me to get sucked in too far. There's a mechanism that I've made a habit of in the morning, starting positive. It gives you a certain strength so that you don't lose yourself nearly as much. It's really been a godsend. It's really been huge for me, and I'm very grateful to practices like Buddhism. Excuse me, I can't even talk. Because I've read a lot of books about Buddha, a lot of books, discourses where people take his point of views and really, explain in depth a lot of what he means and by his statements, and you see a lot of sense in it. And then when you try the ones that seem to work for you, you go kind of as an experiment to see, well, let's see if that is true for me as well. Because certain things ring a certain tone inside your heart, and you just know that there's something there. So, it's worth going to check that out for yourself. So if you look at it through that way, almost like a scientist, and you're open to the emotional aspect as well, though, there's no right or wrong. You explore your inner self and find your ways to make yourself happy. And I found making habits one of the most important things. Develop some discipline so that your brain repeats a certain pattern in similar situations. That helps you to remain calm so that you're avoiding unnecessary moments where you kind of lash out, and then you don't have to say later on, I shouldn't have done that, or I could have said that differently. It's to be centered so that you're not pulled on either side nearly as much, which is very difficult. And in some situations I found it pretty easy. Some situations you find it pretty difficult, actually. Sometimes you think you're over something and then you realize you're not, but then developing that brain pattern to be okay with all those things. This is something that we should learn as we grow up in school, actually. But, we're here now, and that's the function that the brain can have to help us to become much more happy, much more often. So I'll leave you with that. Wherever you are around the world, whatever time it is that you're watching this video, my mouth is so dry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I feel that. Thank you. Peace.